meeting for the proposed. I'd like to welcome everyone to the public meeting for the proposed draft permit for the Plant Hammond Ash Pond 3 closure in place. In accordance with EPD's, in accordance with EPD's safety precautions regarding the COVID-19 virus, EPD is hosting this public meeting via Zoom. Zoom is a free web conferencing platform that also allows for participation by phone. We're still getting set up, so thank you for your patience and as we prepare for the public meeting. Please note that all web participants are joining in mute only, maybe not, and the host can unmute participants. If you're joining us on the web platform, we ask that you please do not turn on your video so that it doesn't interfere with our recording of the meeting. Also, please rename yourself to your first and last name as you want to be logged in the public record. Comments will be accepted after the presentation on the proposed permit is completed. You may then list your name and affiliation in the chat window to indicate that you would like to make a comment during today's meeting. Further instructions will be provided after the presentation. We will be saving the transcripts of the chat dialog box for our records. And now our co-host is going to paste a message into the chat. The message indicates that we'd like to welcome everyone to the public meeting for the proposed draft permit for Plant Hammond Ash Pond 3 closure. If you'd like to make comments, please keep the chat window open. After the presentation, there will be an option for you to list your name and affiliation to indicate that you would like to make a comment during today's meeting. Further instructions will be provided after the presentation. We will be saving the transcripts of the chat dialog box for our records. And now I'd like to turn it over to William Cook to begin the presentation.
Well, good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on how you see 6 o'clock. I did want to let everybody know, because I do see a number of raised hands. I know in the very beginning we said raise hands if you'd like to make a comment. If you would also please type your name into the chat and your affiliation as well, and then that will help us to make sure that we do go in order by the folks who would like to make a comment. And feel free to do that at any point. We're going to begin with a presentation. So feel free to go ahead and start putting into the chat your name, affiliation, if you'd like to make a comment, or you're welcome to do it immediately after the presentation. Okay. Again, I'd like to welcome you to this public meeting. My name is William Cook, and I am the program manager of the Solid Waste Management Program here in the Georgia EPD's Land Protection Branch. Today, again, we are hosting this meeting via Zoom. And again, Zoom is a free web conferencing platform that allows participation by computer and phone. Today's date is Tuesday, August the 10th, 2021, and the time is now 6:03 p.m. The purpose of this meeting is to take comments on the proposed draft permit for Plant Hammond's Ash Pond 3 closure that is being evaluated for permitting by the Environmental Protection Division. Please note that we are here this evening to listen to your comments. We will not be answering any questions this evening. However, we will make note of any questions and incorporate them in EPD's response to comments. So again, if you ask a question, please note we won't be answering those tonight or this evening, but we will make note of those and we will respond to them in the document that we put together for the response to comments, and that will be pasted on the webpage. Okay, during this presentation, we will be giving a brief summary of the Hammond AP3 and the draft permit for closing, including, as you can see here, the location and status of Hammond Ash Pond 3, the regulations governing the closure of it, the draft permit conditions, or the more important conditions. We won't try to go over every single one. Links to additional information on this process, and options for providing comments for the remainder of the comment period. And again, we'll say this a couple more times, is that the comment period for written comments will continue after today for approximately another 30 days and be ending on September 10th. All right, before we begin with the specifics on Hammond Ash Pond 3, it may be helpful to define some of the terms and acronyms used in today's presentation. right? A term you will hear often is cold combustion residuals, or CCR, and it is the regulatory term for coal ash. Another term frequently heard is surface impoundment, and it means a natural topographic depression, man-made excavation, or dike area designed to hold CCR and liquids. Also, you may often hear the terms or the lettering GWMP, and that is shorthand for Groundwater Monitoring Plan. And also another term you may hear is Notice of Intent, and this is short in this presentation often to NOI. And an NOI is a letter from the owner notifying EPD of their intended actions. Now, just for a brief overview of Hammond AP3. First of all, it is located in Floyd County on approximately 1,100 acres. Ash Pond 3, as you can see, it's close to where the yellow arrow is pointing, is only about 25 acres out of that total 1,100. It was first placed in service in 1977, and the unit was converted to dry ash disposal in the early 1980s, and the unit ceased receiving any ash in the early 1990s. Now, related to our CCR regulations and how it affects this facility is, and AP3 is regulated by Georgia CCR Regulations, Chapter 391-3-4-.10, as you can see on your screen. And this also incorporates the federal regulations that we adopted by reference. Georgia CCR permitting program was approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in December of 2019. CCR regulations allow the owner or operator to close ash ponds by one of two methods. It can be closed in place with an engineered final cover system, or it can be closed by removal. AP3 is an inactive CCR surface impoundment, and the plan is to close it in place. As noted, again, it has stopped receiving CCR well before the October 19, 2015 date, and we did receive EPD did receive a notice of intent to close by the permittee on December 7th, 2015.
Pre-closure conditions of Hammond AP3 include that there was no system installed over the unit. Stormwater was allowed to infiltrate approximately 50 feet of CCR uncontrolled. Groundwater levels in CCR ranged from 0 to approximately 9.5 feet. There was no groundwater monitoring system to detect releases into the aquifer. In 2018.
All this is really important, and I don't know what happened.
To the volume?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened to the volume.
Where is it? I don't remember.
If you would please
asking me,
please remain muted.
It used to be here. I mean, that was one of my options, but now.
Thank you.
I don't. It's missing this. I don't know.
Just one moment, please.
Would the formal speaker give us your name and title?
We have several speakers today. William Cook was the initial speaker. Tammy Buckley is acting as the host, advancing the slides, and Keith Stevens is attempting to present this slide at the moment.
What does that say?
We would like to ask everyone.
Start video, mute.
Keith, do you want to mute everyone?
I'm trying. I can't find the button.
Watch out. I just feel does nothing.
I thought it was right up here somewhere.
It was. No, I mean, I don't ever do that one because it doesn't ever seem to do anything. Maybe I just go all the way out.
There we go. Sorry for the delay. In 2018, Georgia Power completed a final cover system that consisted of a 6-inch topsoil layer for vegetative growth, 18 inches of infiltration layer soil, a geocomposite drainage layer to wick water off of the 60 millimeter high density polyethylene geomembrane. Post-closure care will continue at the facility for 30 years from permit issuance. Components of post-closure care include maintenance of the final cover system, maintenance of the groundwater monitoring system, and maintenance of the groundwater monitoring and reporting. Future use may only include uses that do not disturb the final cover system. Currently, there are plans in place to operate a solar farm on top of the facility. This farm is ballasted so as not to penetrate final cover.
Groundwater monitoring is required by federal and state regulations, specifically Georgia Rule 391-3-4-.10.6. An EPD approved groundwater monitoring plan, or GWMP, is required for the closure permit. Groundwater corrective action is required if certain constituents, called Appendix 4 constituents, are detected statistically above groundwater protection standards and no alternate source can be demonstrated. Groundwater monitoring data can be viewed publicly online at the Georgia Power website shown below. Hammond AP3 currently has 18 monitoring wells in a network used for testing groundwater or assessing groundwater levels. All CCR units must have upgradient and downgradient wells in the monitoring network. Groundwater monitoring wells must be maintained for the duration of the post-closure care period. Any changes to the groundwater monitoring network must be approved by EPD, including the removing of wells from the network, called decommissioning or abandonment, or installation of new wells in a network. Groundwater results must be reported at least semi-annually or twice a year to EPD. The figure shown depicts the groundwater monitoring wells at Hammond AP3. Background wells are used to assess natural background conditions. Downgradient wells are compared to background wells to assess the potential for a release occurring. Background wells are highlighted in blue on the figure. Downgradient compliance wells are highlighted in yellow on the figure. Groundwater flow direction is from the left to the right or west to east.
EPD will assure effectiveness and maintenance of the final cover and groundwater monitoring system through periodic inspections and review of groundwater monitoring results. Important conditions of the draft permit include post-closure care for 30 years, control of site access, that the permittee will conduct groundwater monitoring and report the results of inspections and groundwater monitoring, and then also maintain a publicly accessible internet site and records, and then also maintain financial assurance to ensure funds are available for maintenance and post-closure care. Next steps following this meeting, the EPD will evaluate the written and verbal comments made, respond to those comments in writing, post the responses on our website, and EPD may make changes to the draft permit based on comments received.
We now invite participants to comment. As a reminder, We'd ask that you raise your hand to make a comment. That's *9 on your phone. I can't see all of the gallery, but I can see that there are some raised hands. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Written comments are also welcome. Please send your written comments to epd.comments@dnr.ga.gov. If you would please include as the subject Hammond AP3 draft CCR permit. The comment deadline is 4:30 p.m. on Friday, September 10th, 2021. The draft permit can be viewed at the link shown below, and the announcements associated with this can be viewed at the announcement at the link at the bottom of the page. This meeting was advertised by contacting individuals with a known interest via the Environmental Protection Division's notification list and by posting the notice and associated materials onto EPD's website. Please note that today's meeting is not for the purpose of answering questions. This is a meeting to receive public comment on the proposed draft permit for Plant Hammond Ash Pond 3 closure. And if I could get John to tell me how many participants we have.
Tammy, we have 120 participants on the meeting tonight.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that we have a few of those participants who have joined by phone. If you've joined this meeting on the web platform, we ask that you take a moment to open the chat feature, which is available to click on once you hover over the top or bottom of your screen. Once the chat box is open on your screen, please indicate if you'd like to make a comment during today's meeting by listing your name and affiliation. At this time, I'll take a minute to pause and allow those participating on the web conference platform to do this. Once you have the chat box open, you'll list your name and affiliation in the chat. Our co-host, John, will call out the names of those who have indicated that they'd like to make a comment. Then unmute your connection and ask your comment. Okay, now's the time to begin taking comments. So John, if you can unmute and you can just call on the participants who wish to make a comment in the order that you've identified that they have requested to make a comment.
Yes, certainly. And I'm just going to do it in the order that I can see on my screen. So I don't know what order that is, but here you go. So the first person I'm going to call upon who's raised their hand is Jesse Demon Bruin Chapman. Jesse, if you could unmute, please.
Sure, thank you. Jesse Demumbrian Chapman, I'm the Executive Director and Riverkeeper with Coosa River Basin Initiative, resident of Rome, Georgia. Right. I'm grateful for the ability to comment on the closure permit for Hammond AP3. CRBI will be submitting technical comments in writing. So tonight I wanted to focus briefly on the bigger picture of this proposed permit. These ponds are closing because of the 2015 CCR rule, and the intent of that rule is crystal clear. We must stop storing coal ash where it can come in contact with water. The spirit of the CCR rule is to create circumstances where this dangerous waste product is stored dry, away from water. With that in mind, this proposed closure permit, which leaves 1 million tons of coal ash partially sitting in and interacting with groundwater, completely fails to meet the requirements laid out by the 2015 rule. Put another way, storing coal ash permanently in groundwater is not dry storage. As a matter of fact, we know that constituents of the coal ash are already leaking out of the unlined impoundment, which is a pretty poor start to a permanent storage plan. Regardless of what this draft permit attempts to do on paper, this ash pond exists in the physical world, and allowing it to remain in groundwater does not protect the Coosa River or Weiss Lake downstream. Instead, further problems down the line are guaranteed because water will continue to interact with and leach out from this toxic coal ash. For decades, the Coosa River Basin has hosted this power plant, which has generated millions of tons of unknown industrial waste containing toxic metals. EPD can and should impose at least minimal protections requiring the separation of this waste from our water resources. And Georgia Power should want to do that in order to repay this community for its hospitality by restoring the site to the conditions that existed before it built the plant. It's not too late to correct course. CRBI calls on EPD to issue a closure permit that provides meaningful protection in the real world. Require Georgia Power to excavate AP3 and move the coal ash into a modern, dry, lined facility with a leachate collection system. This is the only truly protective closure plan for Ash Pond 3. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And John, I'd intended to ask Brian to identify the callers, but either John or Brian, if you want to call on the next participant to make their comments.
I had made a list as they were typing in their name earlier. I don't know if it was 100% accurate, but I had earlier Rhonda Baldonado, please.
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Baldonado, and I come to you as a mother and a grandmother to plead for closure by removal. I am a resident of unincorporated Bartow County, but I spend a great deal of my time in and around the city of Rome area. I have 6 grandchildren, 5 of whom live in Northwest Georgia. They deserve clean groundwater and waterways. And as in our indigenous communities would remind you, water is life. Since 2005, I have seen train after train, train car after train car filled with heaping loads of coal run through my town. Georgia Power had to know that one day they would need to safely and properly dispose of their toxic coal ash waste. I know people need electricity, but by far, they need clean, safe water and waterways more. It is a moral outrage that we have to engage in direct action in the endeavor to get the state of Georgia to force Georgia Power to do the right thing. It is a moral imperative that Georgia Power safely and properly dispose of their toxic coal ash waste by closure, by removal. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, who's next on the list?
Linda Bell.
Hi, my name is Linda Bell, and as a former Rome resident, I am familiar with Plant Hammond, and we currently live near Plant McDonough in Cobb County, and I'm concerned about your plans for the coal ash there as well. What you decide regarding Plant Hammond will likely set the precedent for what you decide on Plant McDonough. In fact, I think this being the first hearing, it'll likely set the precedent for all of the future hearings. And even more than that, Georgia, I think, is one of the first states to hold hearings on the closure of coal ash pits. So I don't think it's going too far to say that you're going to set the precedent for all other states. So this is a very important decision you have to make. My position is that I want the coal ash to be stored in properly lined pits. I know when I read statements from Georgia Power, they say that they are in compliance. When they say they're in compliance, I think about when I used to help my children with their homework, and they had an assignment from the teacher, and let's say it was a 2-page paper, and then they showed it to me, and I suggested maybe they could go a little bit further, they could make it a little bit better. And they would say, but we were only required to do 2 pages. But I don't think we're always looking for compliance. I think we're looking for excellence. And that's what we would like to see from you, because we're dependent on the EPA and the EPD to protect us from pollution, which frankly, oftentimes around business interests. And when you don't act in the best interest of the people, it further erodes what is already a problem today, and that is that people are losing faith in their government to look after their best interests. And so if you make the decision to allow Georgia Power to merely cap the coal ash instead of following the gold standard, which is using lined pits, then we are left to believe that you exist to serve business interests, not the people's interests. Please, I ask you not to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Brian.
Next, we have Sonia Fricks.
Thank you. I'm Sonia Fricks, a registered voter in unincorporated DeKalb County. I also have a disability, so doing the research on this was difficult for me. But my understanding is that currently the EPA is recommending that the best way to dispose of coal ash is with a completely lined unit. And what you're wanting is a unit that has only a top liner. And it sounded like there were a lot of thises and that's where you could get out of the EPA's intent for the best the best way of lining. And it seems to me that that's what you're doing. You're using some of the thises and that's to be able to not properly line this completely. And I agree with the former caller that you are going to be setting a precedent. And I've not been exposed to toxic coal ash, but I have been exposed to toxic chemicals and what's known sick building syndrome. And so I do have some experience with toxic chemicals. And I'm curious to know, have you tested this coal ash and what toxic chemicals exist in it that we already know about? And if you haven't tested it, do you plan to test it before it is lined? And then what kind of testing procedures are you going to do after it's lined? And what mitigation will you do if toxins are found seeping into the soil or the groundwater? And I understand that you have to post your findings on the internet, but I didn't see anywhere where it said that you had to mitigate any toxins being released. And I agree with the First Lady. I think she's very well spoken that we don't want to do the minimum we can do. We're talking about children's futures here. I don't want to have to explain to children 20 years from now why they can't drink their water in Atlanta, in Columbus, in Savannah, and in Macon. I mean, do you want to have to do that? We already know the people in Juliet can't drink their water. And do you want to actually have to explain people in Georgia's largest cities why they have to purchase drinking water 20 years from now? And I think I kind of ran out of steam, but I am totally against the way that this is going to be disposed of. I do not want an unlined bottom on the soil. I don't know what technical name you call it, but I do not want that. I want a completely lined disposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Brian. Next commenter.
Next person on the list was Chris Bowers. Were you there, Chris?
Hi, yes. Thank you, everybody. And I see some familiar names, and I hope everyone is doing well, given these unusual circumstances and unfortunate circumstances we find ourselves under. Once again, my name is Chris Bowers from the Southern Environmental Law Center, and we appreciate this opportunity to comment on the draft permit for Coal Ash Pond 3 at Plant Hammond. We'll submit additional written comments in the coming weeks. This permit has numerous fundamental flaws, but I'll just discuss a handful of them tonight. The coal ash rules impose bright line criteria that this closure plan must meet if it's legally allowed to close this massive coal ash pond in place near the shores of the Coosa River. These so-called closure performance standards describe various ways, some things that the ash pond must ensure and other things that the ash pond that cannot happen at the ash pond if a closure permit is to be properly issued. For instance, so-called free liquids must be eliminated within the waste pit, and the waste pit must be closed such that the probability of future impoundment of water, sediment, or slurry is precluded. Now, the word precluded means in most dictionaries rendered impossible. It is common sense that free liquids cannot be eliminated to meet this requirement, nor water, sediment, or slurry precluded if water and the solid waste, which is a porous media, is left in a condition that's where they're interacting. Coal ash sitting in an unlined pit beneath the water table renders these standards impossible to meet. For instance, to get a little bit wonky, the federal regulations define free liquids at 40 CFR 257.53 as liquids that readily separate from the solid portion of a waste under ambient temperature and pressure. But rather than even attempt to comply with these unambiguous requirements, the closure plan largely sidesteps them. For instance, the written closure plan refers not to the free liquids elimination requirement that I just outlined, but instead appears to imply compliance with an imaginary one, concluding that so-called free water is no longer impounded. Tellingly, no such free water terminology is used in the closure performance standards. By proposing to approve this fundamentally flawed closure plan, this permit, in turn, is improper and should be withdrawn and revised. Similarly, we disagree that Ash Pond 3 precludes the probability of future impoundment of water, sediment, and slurry for the reasons just outlined. I will note that in EPD's opening remarks, a major portion of its time was devoted to explaining groundwater monitoring requirements. That is all well and good, but those are entirely separate requirements imposed by the rule. Compliance with them does not render compliance with the closure performance standards themselves unnecessary. They are two separate requirements that need to be met separately. In closing, the closure plan variously sidesteps the relevant closure performance standards or makes conclusions as to compliance that are unsupported by the facts. The most basic fact of all being that the bottom of the ash pond remains submerged in Georgia's groundwater. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Brian, next commenter.
Next, we have Jessica Mcqueen.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I am a Georgia resident who was born and raised very short distance from Plant Wansley, another coal-fired plant in West Georgia in the unincorporated Yellow Dirt community. I was raised on well water until municipal water became available in that rural community. And to this day, I struggle with reproductive issues, autoimmune disorders, and am unable to obtain much explanation as to why these conditions persist within my family. And I would like to urge the EPD to only accept removal. As has been stated, any contact with water is incredibly dangerous, and a 30-year monitoring period is simply not enough when these chemicals are not going to evaporate in a 30-year time period. These are chemicals that will rest in the body for decades. And with the future of our climate being so urgently requiring our attention, there shouldn't be any risk taken that could potentially expose people to coal ash, because we know it's toxic. We know that that it does really horrible things to folks' bodies, and that it can affect even their children who are not born yet or even conceived yet. So the proposed regulations as it stands are just simply insufficient to protect the life of Georgians and the health of the ecosystems upon which we all depend. So I would urge full removal, and consideration that cap in place is just simply insufficient.
Thank you for your comment, Brian. Next commenter.
Next is Laura Stuck. Are you on the call?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Laura Stuck. I am a resident of Georgia, and I would really like to urge you all to please require Georgia Power to excavate this coal ash and put it in a lined pit. I get to drive past a landfill, and we know that landfills are not required to be in unlined pits. And I get to see all the dead trees around that. So I get to see all the contamination leaking into the water just from trash. And we already know that there is contamination around Plant Hammond. In 2018, we know there's a report that said that there is boron, molybdenum, cobalt, arsenic around the other ash ponds at Plant Hammond 1 and 2. And I haven't seen any plans from Georgia Power regarding excavation of these pits. So we already know that there's contamination, and yet nothing is happening. So it doesn't make sense to say, oh, we'll just leave it in place and see what happens. Because if you're not going to do anything when there's contamination, then you're just saying, well, let's just let the water get contaminated by these chemicals. And nobody should be drinking those chemicals. I also want to point out to you all that, or those heavy metals, according to the Georgia Health Department, about 1 in 5 Georgians drink from well water. So that's about 20% of the population here. So if we say, if you all let these coal ash pits remain unlined, you're saying, we're fine with about 20% of Georgians getting sick from heavy metals in their well water. And that's just really disturbing to me, that people who are supposed to be protectors of our water, of our environmental resources, would even consider allowing that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter, please.
Next, I have James Reef.
Yes, I'm here. Am I allowed to share my screen? I guess not.
I'm sorry. I think we can share screens. Give me one moment. I can.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
1 second. Okay. So the Georgia Power operates the, 1 second here. Oops. I'm trying to get this to come down. There we go. Georgia Power operates the environmental compliance website. It's a very good website. Talks about CCR management and ash pond closures. There's a update about ash pond closures. And then they have a tab here for plant-specific data. If you click that, you'll get a list of all the plants. It's a really beautiful website. You get a picture of the plant. There's Plant Hammond. And if I go and I look at Plant Hammond, this is Plant Hammond CCR rule compliance data and information. And then there's one, there's a lot of information here. It's all very good. I'm interested in this one, placement above the uppermost aquifer. And I keep getting that drop down, sorry. You get a document, and what happens is it's a document, it's a Georgia Power document. It's registered, certified professional engineer. Sorry, I cannot say this person's name. but let me just read it real quick. EPA's disposal, sorry, I'm having trouble there. I can't quite see it. Yeah, here we go. EPA's disposal of coal combustion residuals from electric utilities final rule 40 CFR Part 25760 requires that an existing CCR surface impoundment be constructed with a base that is located 5 feet above the upper limit of the uppermost aquifer and must not have an intermittent, recurring, or sustained hydraulic connection between any proportion of the base of the CCR unit and the uppermost aquifer due to normal fluctuations in groundwater elevations. He describes it, and then basically he says, under current conditions, this plant impoundment does not meet the location restriction requirement of 40 CFR Part 25760A. And what's interesting is if you go to the plant list and you check any of them, none of the impoundments meet the requirement. And what it means is the importance of it is, I'm sorry, I'll come back to the Zoom and stop sharing if I can get back to it. I'm trying to figure out how to unshare my screen. So I don't want to leave the, stop share, there we go. So the main thing is when the aquifer rises, it touches the bottom of the ash pond and it's going to leach out whatever toxins it can grab from the bottom. And this is the problem. If the ash pond is unlined, you're going to get leaching of toxic materials. And so the main point there is, if I burn fossil fuel, part and parcel of all burning of fossil fuels is I externalize the cost of managing the waste stream. There's a waste stream for CO2, that cost is externalized. Now I have the coal ash, and what Georgia Power is trying to do is they're trying to externalize the cost of managing the coal ash. They don't want to spend the money to properly manage the coal ash. I'm sorry I went over. I just wanted to call out that one document on the Georgia Power website, and I'm sorry I went over.
Thank you for your comment. Brian?
Next on the list, we have Dr. Jairo Garcia. Are you there?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to comment. As you can tell by my accent, I am not originally from Georgia. I'm from South America, but I've been living in Georgia for 20 years. I love this state. I've been working here. I have my house here. I love everything in this state, and it's my home. I teach classes at the Georgia Institute of Technology at Johns Hopkins University in climate change and sustainability management. And I want to, when I teach my students about sustainability, you have to consider 3 aspects of sustainability, which is the social, the economic, and the environmental. And then I think you have heard very clearly from many of the speakers here today about the environmental concerns, valid concerns, and scientific data that demonstrate that this is a bad idea to remove those, to dispose those coal ashes that are extremely poisonous. You guys have all the science available, and you know that this is environmental is not a feasible solution to follow. The other aspect is the social. You have heard comments about citizens here in Georgia has been affected physically by all the contamination that have been produced from these coal plants. So I want to address the issue from the economic perspective. You know that we spend more than $3.2 billion from our economy, Georgia, to bring here coal and other fossil fuels from other states. 25% of the Georgia power comes from Alabama. As you know exactly, Georgia Power is not a Georgia company. It's just the name. Georgia Power belongs to the Southern Company, which is based in Alabama. And as you know, all the directors, including the president of Georgia Power, is from Alabama. All the I've been working very closely with Georgia Power. All of them are from Alabama. They do not care about what is happening in Georgia. And then, as James specifically demonstrated with his presentation in this during this session, he pointed out that the Georgia Power, Georgia Power, which is basically the southern company based in Birmingham, Alabama, wants to save money and affect the people of Georgia. They do not care. They do not care about how it's going to affect us. They just want to save money. Georgia Power has been making billions of dollars, as you all are aware, in profits, while we had to pay all the what James specifically point out as externalities. And in economics, it's called externalities. I can give you a whole session about that. In basic economics, the Pigovian principle states that those that pollute has to pay for what they are doing. It's specifically, business that engage in activities that create adverse side effects to society, including the cost of that affect the market price. So if you are interested in economics, you need to understand that Georgia Power has to pay for what they have been doing and not save money contaminating our water and polluting our people. The other point that I want to mention is that even though they comment that the Georgia Power, the electricity is cheap in Georgia, that is not true. I can send you, I'm gonna put in the chat the links that demonstrate that the bills in Georgia are the highest in the country, including the engineering burden in the entire state of Georgia. So the bills are expensive, the contamination are enormous, and this idea is absolutely horrendous. It's just a bad idea from the environmental, social, and economic perspective. I please ask you to reconsider this position and make scientific and economic and social benefit solutions for the people of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Brian, next commenter, please.
Yes, next is Hannah Schultz. Hannah, are you on the call?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment. My name is Hannah Schultz, and I am the Program Associate at Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. We are a faith-based environmental nonprofit. We engage communities of faith across the state in stewardship of creation through education and advocacy as a religious response to global climate change, environmental injustice, and other disruptions to creation. We object to Georgia Power's plan to leave toxic coal ash capped in place. Studies have shown that coal ash has been leaking from unlined ponds, contaminating our groundwater and infiltrating domestic drinking wells. Coal ash contains dangerous heavy metals, including arsenic, lead, and hexavalent chromium, a known carcinogen. It has been linked to lung and heart problems, stomach ailments, and other health concerns. Unlined coal ash ponds that sit submerged in groundwater are an environmental danger and threaten the health of Georgia's communities. God calls us to love or to care for God's creation and to protect the natural resources which have been gifted to us. Water is one of our most sacred and finite resources, and we must help preserve it. It is against God's will to leave the coal ash where it will continue polluting our water. Furthermore, permanently leaving more than 1 million tons of toxic coal ash in a leaking, unlined pit poses significant public health risks for the communities who live near these ponds and rely on local water sources. As people of faith, one of our central values is caring for our neighbor. We are called to speak out against unjust policies, such as the cap-in-place permit that will continue to cause suffering to all of our neighbors. All communities have equal rights to clean drinking water. It is unjust for Georgia Power to excavate toxic coal ash from some unlined pits, but cap in place others. If the safer solution is right for some Georgia communities, it should be right for all of them. In order to care for all of our neighbors, all coal ash ponds must be safely and thoroughly excavated, and the coal ash must be moved to dry, lined landfills where it cannot leak into our waterways and pollute our drinking water. It would be a deliberate sin against God and our neighbors in that community to leave it there. Thanks again.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, our next commenter.
Melissa Keefe.
I'm glad to have the opportunity to comment about this evening. I live in Rome, And I am speaking out against Georgia Power's plan to leave Plant Hammond's ash pond number 3 unlined and capped. I don't believe it is okay to leave 1.1 million tons of coal ash in an unlined pond where it is currently submerged in groundwater. And I will skip over things that have been mentioned by other commenters. When we moved to Rome 7 years ago, we were advised not to drink the water. And we have used filtered water for drinking and cooking. But as I think about it, really, this isn't right. What about people who can't afford water filters? What about people who assume the water that they are drinking and giving to their children to drink is totally safe? And in fact, do I even know that the water filters that we've been using for the past 7 years can even protect us from getting sick and dying from the heavy metals and carcinogens in the ash? Well, I think our water should be perfectly safe. Is it too much to expect a utility company we all pay every month, many of us for decades and lifetimes, to conduct business ethically and responsibly and clean up their messes? No, I don't think it's asking too much. And yet, this is what Georgia Power is now asking the Georgia Environmental Protection Division to let them do. And as was mentioned by the last commenter, Georgia Power must even know that leaving the ash in an unlined pond is not now the accepted standard of practice, because they are excavating some ponds. In fact, they are going to excavate 3 of the 4 ponds at Plant Hammond. So why do they think that they can leave the 4th one, pond number 3, unlined? And it's basically a ticking time bomb environmentally. Georgia Power says it intends to build a solar power facility on top of ash pond number 3, but this does nothing to mitigate the ever-present danger of the toxins leaking into the groundwater. In fact, putting a solar facility on the unlined pond would make it even more unlikely that Georgia Power would go back and excavate it properly. This is our chance now to get it done right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, Brian. Next commenter.
Monica Johnson.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity to comment. So I am a lifelong Georgia resident, and I also have, several autoimmune disorders that I've dealt with my entire life. And I am loath to see something like this that will doom further generations to problems with any of the myriad of problems that could come from taking in the heavy metals that would be leached into our groundwater by the action of leaving millions of tons of coal ash in the ground. I think that we have a moral and political and human imperative in order to stop this in its tracks. As many have said, Georgia Power makes billions and billions in profit. They said they aim to put a solar plant on top of this last pond, as someone just mentioned. But we have history of people being negatively affected, their health being negatively affected by the contamination of these coal ash ponds, and we need to do the right thing this time. We need to not leave any confusion on what the correct option is, which is to remove all of the leftover coal ash from areas where it can come into contact with groundwater. So, as many have said, we have a collective responsibility here. Those who are on the boards are elected and appointed, and otherwise working officials, as well as each and every one of us who are in our communities and work with our communities and care about our communities, to make sure that this business's interests do not take precedence over the health of Georgia's citizens. So thank you for the time.
Thank you for your comment, Brian. Next
Next
commenter.
we have Robert Wharton.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Robert Wharton. I'm a political scientist and lifelong Georgia resident, currently residing in unincorporated Ackworth. Georgia Power should remove this waste or conduct a proper cleanup with a lined pit. That's not what is happening. Georgia Power, in my opinion, is gambling with our public health and fresh water by only capping this site in place. And I think it's a travesty. We only need to look to Juliet, Georgia, where contaminants from plant cheer are already wreaking havoc on many locals to understand what kind of threat these coal ash ponds pose. I don't think we should accept toxic coal ash leaching into our groundwater and waterways. If it is decided that cap in place is suitable, we will be hearing more about this in the coming years and decades. And it will be much more expensive than if we had done it right the first time. It won't just be measured in dollars by that point. It will be cancer clusters. I don't want that for any Georgian or Georgia family. Our fresh water is also going to become more and more of a commodity as time goes on, and we will be fools not to do everything in our power to protect it. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your comment. Brian.
Next, we have Lee Kendrick. Lee, are you on the call? Okay, I suggest we come back to Lee if time permits. Next is Logan Verhagen.
That was great. Thank you so much. I do want to just start off this by, I don't remember her name, but there was a commenter who commented about drinking well water as a child and having issues as a result of that. I just want to commend her. That was a very brave statement she made. Took a lot of courage to say that personal detail. So I wanted to applaud her courage. I also want to point out that it says something that there's homogenous comments about this. Georgia's a pretty divisive state, but it seems everyone's on the same page that things should not be stored in this manner. I'm an engineer by discipline. And all I know that is if you told me to isolate something and only put something on the top of it, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like it can leak in every direction. You have your background wells, but you zoomed in on the map during this presentation. Those background wells are located near your other ash ponds. So, those background wells are only going to measure something that might already be contaminated. So that just feels like it's poor thought initially. There are better disposal methods for this as well. Like, there are dewatering treatment methods that you can use. There's different disposal methods you can use. You can remove some of the heavy metal contaminants from here. So even if you do dispose of it in a landfill, it's not an issue for citizens. If you are proceeding with this plan, twice a year samplings are not enough for citizens, and they're difficult for most citizens to find. Many people have mentioned the plant share failures around the Juliet area. Those people trusted Georgia Power with their health on numerous occasions for decades, and Georgia Power let them down. I don't think Georgia Power can be trusted to do anything but worry about their bottom line in this instance. And I think that should be taken into considerations. When we were growing up, we all heard just because you can doesn't mean you should. And you need to dispose of this waste properly in a properly lined pond. And you need to dewater this coal ash before removal as well to ensure that there's not any further toxic metal leaks into the groundwater. This will be a travesty if this is allowed to continue. And I just want to applaud everyone else for all of their comments beforehand. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Brian, next commenter.
Cynthia Patterson. Cynthia, are you on the call?
I am. Hello, my name is Cynthia Patterson. I live in Marietta. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. 11 miles west of Rome, on the banks of the Coosa River, 1 million tons of toxic coal ash is silently leaking. At Plant Hammond, coal ash is submerged in groundwater, a perpetual threat to our drinking water. Unsafe levels of arsenic, boron, cobalt, and sulfate already contaminate the groundwater at Plant Hammond. Cap in place is not an option to safely store coal ash forever. If coal ash is not contained in a lined pond or landfill, it can pollute our groundwater and wells. EPD's permitting decision is permanent. Citizens expect the EPD and Georgia Power to do the right thing. Excavate the coal ash and contaminated soil and store it in lined landfills distant from our waterways. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, next commenter.
Next, we have Jenny Seitz.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Jenny Seitz, and I am a resident of Juliet, Georgia. And I am here tonight to adamantly oppose the permit for Plant Hammond's AP3 pond. The Environmental Protection Division is charged with protecting Georgia's air, land, and water resources through the authority of state and federal statutes. It is responsible for enforcing actions to correct serious environmental problems and to bring businesses, individuals, and government entities into compliance with environmental laws. It is unethical, it is immoral, and it is irresponsible for Georgia Power to leave 1 million tons worth of toxic coal ash submerged 50 feet into the ground forever. It is the responsibility of the Environmental Protection Division to require Georgia Power to make sure that the land is protected and the water is protected from the toxic leaching of chemicals into the ground where the residents are forced to drink water that has been contaminated with that. I live in Juliet, where there are 846 homes who depend on well water. We do not have access to city water, county water. And here we have a 700-acre ash pond. What we're talking about at Plant Hammond is a 25-acre ash pond. And in Juliet, it's a 700-acre ash pond. If you, the EPD, approve this permit for Plant Hammond, you're setting a precedence which will allow Georgia Power to get approval for the remaining permits, the 9 other permits that they're requesting. And I think it's imperative that the EPD not allow this to happen. I think that additional wells should be put in place. According to the slide you showed earlier, there are 18 monitoring wells that are being tested 2 times a year. They're going to be required to report those contaminants twice a year. 5 of those wells were down gradient from the ash pond. I think that in itself is ridiculous. You should be looking at where the water is seeping from the ash pond. EPD should require them to dig additional wells and to increase the monitoring. I think that even though Georgia Power claims that they adequately meet the requirements of closures, actually the one gentleman earlier showed a Georgia Power document which proves that they do not meet the requirements of closure. Even though they say they are following all of the rules and the requirements, I have to ask, what is the safest way to close the ponds? What is the safest way to close them? And I hope that the EPD considers that. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comment. Brian?
Okay, next, Nina Dutton.
Hello, thanks.
My name is Nina Dutton, and I'm a resident of Atlanta in Fulton County. It is completely unacceptable for the Plant Hammond closure plan to simply cover the coal ash and leave it in place with no lining to prevent leaching into groundwater. I'm calling on EPD to provide a sound justification for its acceptance of this dangerous proposal, because as it stands, I oppose the issuance of this dangerous permit. I did see in the presentation today that there will be monitoring wells to check the groundwater quality, but with just capping in place, that's like spilling a pot of stew all over your kitchen floor and then just checking in from the living room every now and then to see if it's spreading, rather than starting by cleaning up the mess responsibly before it gets worse. As EPD should be well aware, coal ash is toxic, and as others have mentioned already today, it contains hazardous heavy metals and carcinogens, including arsenic and lead, exposure to which is associated with a host of adverse health effects, from lung and heart problems to premature death. At Plant Hammond, coal ash is sitting, as we've already heard from a lot of you folks today, the coal ash is sitting submerged in groundwater where it poses an ongoing threat to our drinking water. These plans are permanent, and this is our last chance to ensure that no catastrophes contaminate our drinking water. We cannot just be thinking of what's easiest and most profitable to do right now, which is what Georgia Power is planning to do by just capping in place. With this permit, the burden is shifted from Georgia Power to us, the public, including people who are too young now to pay Georgia Power bills or vote, or people who are too busy to call in today to comment for themselves, but who will still be affected, and many generations to come who would also be affected. The coal ash at Plant Hammond must be fully cleaned up in order to protect the soil and water we depend on, and in turn to protect our health and the ecological communities we're all part of. In order to protect drinking water in the Coosa River and our broader water systems all over this place known as Georgia and beyond, the coal ash from Plant Hammond should be excavated and stored in lined, dry facilities away from the groundwater we share. Thanks for the opportunity to comment and your time.
Thank you. Brian?
Lauren McQueen? Lauren, are you on the call? Okay, I suggest we skip to the next person, and if time allows, we can come back to Lauren. Aaron Mitchell.
Hi, this is Aaron. Can you hear me?
Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Aaron Mitchell. I am Director of Environmental Affairs for Georgia Power. I'd like to thank EPD for the opportunity to provide comments on the proposed CCR permit for Plant Hammond Ash Pond 3, and I'm also pleased that everyone has chosen to participate in this important process for the permit. First, I'd like to recognize that Georgia is one of only 3 states that EPA has approved to operate its CCR permitting program. And this is an indication that EPA is both reviewed and has confidence in Georgia's regulations in the oversight of the closure of ash ponds. As many of you know, Plant Hammond has been a part of the community since the 1950s and has been permitted in compliance with various environmental regulations throughout that period. The plant was retired in 2019. It's currently being decommissioned, and the ash ponds are in the process of being closed currently. Under both the EPA and Georgia EPD CCR rules, there are 2 approved methods to close ash ponds. Those are closure in place and closure by removal, as have been mentioned tonight. Hammond Ash Pond 3 is being closed in place. And we're doing that using proven engineering methods that include the placement of an effective cover system and installation and maintenance of an environmental monitoring system, both of which comply with the performance standards that are required by both sets of regulations, the federal and the state. The plan submitted by Georgia Power to EPD under this closure plan are using these proven engineering methods, and they're selected and specifically designed for this pond closure to enhance the protection.
I believe we've lost Aaron.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
My apologies. Power blinked. I'm sorry, I forgot where it was. I believe I was saying that the engineering methods are specific for this pond and are designed to enhance the protection of the groundwater during and throughout the closure. EPD's done a thorough job in evaluating the draft permit, and it addresses both the federal and the state rules and establishes permit conditions that we will comply with to ensure that Ash Pond 3 closure remains protective of public health and the environment. And we support these conditions, and I wanted to highlight just a couple. The draft permit requires a minimum of 30 years of post-closure care, and that includes not only maintenance of and the integrity of the final cover system, inspections by the company, and EPD will also perform inspections, and then groundwater monitoring and reporting. Further, the conditions in the permit will require corrective action for the groundwater if needed. And I think it's important to note that test results from the monitoring performed at Hammond Ash Pond 3 meet the federal primary drinking water standards today. Finally, it requires us to maintain records and provide those on our website and to EPD. In wrapping up, two final points that I'd like to make. As we do today, we'll continue to use independent and third-party contractors to perform groundwater monitoring, and that data will continue to be provided on the website. That was displayed earlier today. And finally, the final point is Georgia Power takes our commitment to ensuring protection of the environment very seriously. Plant Hammond, our employees, our retirees, our members of the community, they're around the plant, and the safe, effective closure of Plant Hammond's Ash Pond 3 is an important part of our continued commitment to the community, and we're going to ensure that that is the case. Finally, thank you for your patience with my delay, EPD, and I appreciate the opportunity to make these comments.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Next, we have Charles Frolick. Charles, were you present on the call?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm going to be really simple about this. I just want to remind the Southern Company that as a corporate entity, they're responsible to multiple stakeholders that they may not be aware of, and that's us. And that's everything that's alive in their service area. They are not just responsible to shareholders or the board of directors. So I just want them to be understanding that there are no more externalities in this world. They have to pay attention to the rest of us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment.
Next, we have Scott Bresson.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Scott Bresson. I'm a retired public health professional. I reside in Lawrenceville in Gwinnett County. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I ask that you revise the proposed cap in place for Ash Pond 3 with removal and clean closure by relocating all the coal combustion residuals to a lined facility away from the Coosa River and other rivers and lakes. Cap in place is not an acceptable long-term solution. With cap in place, the coal ash will leach into the groundwater as it has already done at some of the other ponds there in Hammond. The 2018 Earth Justice Report found some of the toxic chemicals and elements that have already been mentioned by some of the other presenters as present in the groundwater on the grounds of Plant Hammond. Earlier in my career, I lived in a house a bit out of town with well water. And one day I was informed that the area's groundwater had been found to be contaminated and that we would need to install an expensive filtering system or move somewhere else. With two young daughters at the time, we were very worried that their health and ours might be affected. Fortunately, we remained healthy, but we were sensitized to the potential for these types of events to upend families and impact their health. Cap in place also leaves the coal ash vulnerable to catastrophic failure due to floods and extreme weather events, posing a threat to many Georgians living downstream as well as the downstream ecosystems. As many of us have been noting with climate change, we are likely to see a continued increase in these extreme type of water events. For the sake of Georgia's population and environment, I respectfully ask that you revise the closure plan to be a clean closure with lime storage in a dry area. It's the right way. Please do it. And thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your comment, Brian.
Next, we have Sue Harmon. Sue, are you present on the call? Okay, we will come back if time allows. Next, I have Stephen Bell. Stephen, are you on the call?
Stephen, you're on mute. We cannot hear you talk, Mr. Bell.
How about now?
Okay, now we can hear you, yes.
Thank you. I'm a former professor from Berry College, and I've done some work on the effects of environmental toxins on human health. But that's not why I'm speaking today. One of my concerns is the use of language. And we're calling it a ash pond when actually it's an ash mountain. And we're looking at coal ash when we're actually looking at environmental toxins. So a toxic mountain is probably a much better way to look at this than ash pond. And I think about the notion that we are, the EPD, and I hear the word P for protection. So when you think about calling a mountain a pond and ash actually mountains and protection, I think we need to think about the way we use that language. It's kind of like the difference between calling something a cricket and calling something a cockroach. So if we re-language it, thinking about a toxic mountain rather than an ash pond, I think it'll put it in a better perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Brian.
Next on the list, I have Lane Wood.
Hi, everybody. I just want to reiterate what Jesse Dimon-Braun Chapman said. It is imperative that we protect drinking water not just for us, but for those downstream. It is not a good idea to have any of this toxic material this close to any drinking water source. So encapsulating an ash pond is not the answer this close to the Coosa River. This is the water source for millions of people downstream. And also, as been pointed out by other speakers, these toxic chemicals are released into the air, they're in the groundwater. Eventually this will leach out. We had an issue at a landfill actually with one of these liners giving way a few years ago. And we were told over and over and over again, oh, it's fine, it'll last for 1,000,000 years, no worries, no worries. Well, we have worries, it gave way. And we also have had a couple of earthquakes in this area near Mentone, Alabama, which is not that far the way the crow flies from Rome, as well as in a little bit further up Northwest Georgia. And that causes ground shifting. So the bladder could be pinched, this stuff could leach out, it could be a disaster. It is a disaster waiting to happen. It doesn't need to be encapsulated. It needs to be removed. It needs to be taken away. It needs to never, ever happen anywhere near a water source. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Brian, next commenter.
I believe it's Nancy McWilliams. Nancy, would you like to make a comment? Okay, we will skip to the next on the list. Shelley Peller, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I appreciate it. I did not plan to speak tonight. I did not plan to make a comment, but I'm listening and thinking, how is this even being debated? If there is a chance that our water source is at risk, how can we take water, our most precious resource, and take that risk? As the representative from Georgia Power said, they take the commitment of protecting our environment seriously, then take all of these comments from all of the wise people that have come before me and take it to heart. We need to do everything we can to ensure that our groundwater is safe, that our soil is safe, that our waterways are safe. It doesn't sound like it's rocket science. If you just put a cover on something, it's going to leach out into the surrounding area. And as we've heard, it's not just for us, it's for generations to come. It's for those downstream. People talk about environmental migration. There are parts of the country that are losing their water. They don't have water resources if you take what's happening in the Southwest. And we're going to take our water and put it at risk when we're going to have even more people living in the Southeast. In the South, we do not have a reputation around the country as being intelligent, as being forward thinking. People think that we're very uneducated and that we're backwards. And I do hope that Georgia Power and the GPD will take all of these comments to heart and do the right thing and protect us, protect our citizens, and protect the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next.
Next on the list, Vivian Mcwilliams. Vivian, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. I'm Vivian Mcwilliams, a Georgia resident. And to start, I'd like to let Aaron Mitchell know that I'm afraid the part of your speech that wasn't audible must have been the part where you explained why it's all right to have this coal ash sitting in groundwater. I didn't hear that part. My other comments are mostly questions that I understand won't be answered tonight, but hopefully in the report we can get some answers. Number one, if this storage plan is adequate and suitable, why would Georgia Power go to the additional expense and trouble of removal and line pits for some of the other coal ash sites? What's the difference between this site and those that are planned to be correctly managed? Is it the comparative cost? Or has this site been, it's such an old one, has it been leaching into the groundwater for so long that what's left behind is relatively benign? If that's true, it seems there'd be a huge potential liability. So of course we can't admit to that. Could the reason be that this site isn't going to be better cared for because of who the neighbors are that are depending on this groundwater for drinking? Another question, what is the point of protecting the ash from falling water? It's admittedly sitting in groundwater. Why cover the surface? This seems the equivalent of putting a Band-Aid over a dire wound, which to some people will be life-threatening. And finally, I haven't heard anything about prior and current groundwater monitoring results, both in the wells that are already in place, both in the pond and in the areas that will be used in comparison. If we knew more of this data, it might help to know if this was going to be an adequate solution. I don't understand, are we expected to be content if the chemical levels just don't get worse than they are when the monitoring starts to be talked about? I know financial assurance for maintenance and monitoring is going to be required, but what if the monitoring turns up problems? What if things are getting worse? Financial insurance should be required to cover the cost of remediation at this latter date, which certainly will be more expensive compared to doing it correctly in the first place. At that point, are we, the consumers, going to be expected to pay for this error in judgment? Thank you for letting me speak, and I hope we can have more answers that are more helpful than what we've heard so far. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian?
Next, I have Grant Blankenship.
No comment.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Doc Kibler.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity. I would like to commend all of the previous respondents because I've had to strike through my entire list that I had prepared as an argument. But a couple of items come up that I think are important to understand is that I know that Georgia Power identified alternative sites to move the coal ash to. They've gone to the trouble to find the solution, and it's different than what we're talking about today. So if a different and better solution exists, then why wouldn't we make that choice? My second comment would be that I'm also a stream mitigation banker, and one of the goals in restoring streams is to uplift the water table. So part of the charge in the Clean Water Act is to improve and uplift our water table, which seems somewhat counterintuitive by what we're trying to accomplish here in cap and seal. If we want the water to rise, then aren't we asking for trouble in the future if it does that? And the last thing I would say, just in an analogy, is if you take a clean glass of water, fill to the top, and drop a tea bag in it, what happens? Color of the water changes. That's because the tea bag isn't sealed. There's not pressure on it. The water doesn't have to move. The leaching occurs and you've got the result. So I appreciate the ability to speak. I hope you'll consider all of these comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, next commenter.
Zach Norton, would you like to comment? Zach, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. My name is Zach Norton, and I'm a resident of Fulton County, Georgia. I have lived in Georgia for 6 years, and I've traveled all across the state. It is my understanding that many lakes in the state were constructed by Georgia Power or its predecessors over the last century. And we would be remiss if we failed to consciously connect the through lines of responsibility from those who created the power grid to those who are now in control of the refuse in question. Time and time again, with Georgia Power's projects, we have seen the thin lines between creation and destruction, the thin line that obviates responsibility during hard times, but teeters towards accepting responsibility when times are easy. Well, we are in hard times today. Today, we have many ongoing disasters that spell crisis at any moment's notice, and Georgians will not accept any more hardship. Those who are responsible for creating these CCRs are also responsible for the destruction they are causing. We know what the dangers are of keeping coal ash next to our precious waterways. That is why we are here. That is why we are looking at these extensive draft permits that are costing $8 billion of ratepayers' money to keep this coal ash where it's at. Imagine all this investment, time, and money being put into a safer means of disposal, a means of disposal that is so logically sound. The threat of contaminating waterways is so small that we can finally all sleep soundly at night. Imagine you have the power to divert another oncoming disaster. Georgia Power has spent millions of dollars of profits trying to win over the approval from communities all around the state through various means like school sponsorships and business partnerships. But surely you have heard the devastating stories of contamination and death. You can only expect these cries to grow more and more if you continue to allow Georgia Power to draft cheap permits like these all across the state, asking you to approve them so that they can take the easy way out during hard times. We know how politicking works. Complete excavation of this ash away from waterways with bottom liners and a sophisticated leachate collection system is the only best solution for this waste, just like we already do with residential trash and other toxic materials. This is a no-brainer. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Next, I have Kaylee Duvall.
Hi. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I wasn't planning to, but I am a resident of Alabama. I live on Weiss Lake, and I'm here because I'd like to see the proper closure and removal of the coal ash. Not only for myself, but also for my 4 children that also live here with me. Their names, just so that they're a little bit more personal to you, are Christina, Samantha, Artie, and Rowan. They will be directly affected by the heavy metals that we already know are toxic. I'm asking you for meaningful protections for my children and for the children of both Alabama and Georgia. Everyone deserves access to clean and safe water. And there is a cheaper way and there is a right way. And I'm asking you guys to do it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, next commenter.
Neil Sardegna, are you on the call?
I am. Thank you for having us today. I have to say, I'm absolutely moved by all the statements and comments of all my of all the folks who've joined here, folks from Georgia and Alabama here, speaking out against coal ash. I'm here to join with y'all. Coal ash at Plant Hammond absolutely needs to be cleaned up in the right way. Absolutely needs to be, uncovered and put in a lined landfill. Just because Georgia Power decided to cap in place this ash back in 2018 doesn't mean that just because they've done it, that it should just be automatically approved. To me, it's absolutely insane that we're even considering this proposal. And to me, it seems like the only reason that is even happening is because of how much absolute power and influence and money and control that Georgia Power has over this state, over its leaders, over those who are supposed to represent our interests. But it's absolutely clear to see there's no community members, there's no people here who are speaking in favor of this proposal. It's pretty much unanimous. And in a place like Georgia, where we can't decide whether or not to, have masks in our schools, and like almost every other issue in this entire state is completely divisive, there to me doesn't seem to be any debate. It seems like the only debate is whether Georgia Power gets its way or not. And I don't think the citizens like myself are in favor of Georgia Power getting their way in this situation. So it seems very clear that we're all here calling on, the Environmental Protection Division to do what, to follow their mission and to protect us as the citizens of Georgia in this situation where our water, our health, our environment is being put at risk by this massive corporation that really is only looking to fill its bottom line right now. And I'm even speaking as someone who, has invested in Georgia Power, but regardless of those investments, my health, my safety, and my community are much more important. And those are what's going to create long-term growth and stability for all our communities and for all our families. So I'm absolutely calling on Georgia EPD. There's absolutely no question. If you represent the state of Georgia and the citizens, their needs and their interests, and your role is to protect our health and our environment, then there's absolutely no question that the coal ash at Plant Hammond AP3 must be excavated and put in a lined landfill away from any waterways, because to do anything other than that is to absolutely ignore our will as citizens and ignore our needs when it comes to y'all's role in this situation. So I want to thank y'all for having us, and I just want to appreciate everyone else for speaking out on this issue. I think, obviously when we come together, we can make our voices heard. And I thank you all, and I appreciate the time to comment.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Dr. Trevor Gear, would you like to comment?
Yes. Hello, I'm Dr. Treva Gear. I come to you from Valdosta, Georgia, the deep South Georgia, and I'm also the chair of the Concerned Citizens of Cook County. And I'm speaking out here because I really can't believe we deal with a whole lot of environmental issues here in the small town of Adel, Georgia, as well as other parts of this region. I can't believe we're having a conversation about whether we're really going to consider replacing poison near our water source. Why are we having this discussion? We know that it's toxic. It's not if it's going to have a negative impact on the health of humans, our environment, our wildlife. It's when. So when that happens, the cost will be astronomical. It's priceless. A life is priceless. I hear the individuals talking about their children contracting cancer. We have a toxic site here in Adel, Georgia, in which it has not been cleaned up, and there's several people who've gotten cancer along the street. But of course, no one wants to call it a cancer cluster. So then it becomes hard. The burden is on the people to fight and to prove that it is, because the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, we're asking you to protect the people, protect us, because this sets precedents that if it is allowed, if Georgia Power is allowed to do this, they will do it in other places. It lays the groundwork for other industries. We know that Georgia is #1 for business. We're asking Georgia to take care of their people at this time and not put profits over our people. So my concern here is that we have to do something different. And the time is now, and it's time for us to make some just reasonable decisions, because the people who have cancer, who's going to speak for them? Why does another generation have to come behind them to explain that, hey, you know, down there where you live is where all the toxins were buried. And yeah, all those people had cancer. We don't have to repeat that history. Georgia Power actually was, our public service commissioner actually allowed them to get a raise on the amount that we pay for Plant Votal. So they're getting what they want. It's time for us to step up. That's all I have to say. We don't want another environmental disaster. We don't want Flint, Michigan to be here in Georgia. We have to protect our resources because they are limited. If we don't take care of it, who will? Thank you for this time. I'm Dr. Treva Gear from Valdosta, Georgia.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Next, I have Natasha Dor-Kabzinski. Are you on the call?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Okay, so I live by Plant McDonough in Smyrna, and I'm a college student at UGA. And I agree with what everyone's been saying. I'm worried about how this coal ash is toxic, and we all know that. And I'm worried about the people downstream, like the friends I have in Southern Atlanta, or my friends who drink well water that are from Tifton, or my friends who are going to the University of Alabama, because Plant Hammond connects to the rivers in Alabama. And then we learned about these issues in school. I took an ecology class, and water scarcity is a growing issue in Georgia. So why are we going to throw away one of the most precious resources we have? We can't take that for granted. And like Dr. Gear was saying, it's a matter of when. If we look at what happened in North Carolina with Duke Energy, the coal ash spill there, they weren't willing to update their methods and do what was safest for the people. And that caused so much damage, huge costs. And it also caused the deaths of many people because they were exposed to all the toxins in that coal ash. So like so many other people have been saying, I remember Shelley was saying this, I think pretty much everyone though, why don't we set a precedent for protecting the people of Georgia? Why can't I be proud of my state? Why do my friends from other states laugh at me when I say I'm from Georgia and I tell them the things that my government agrees to do, the way they sell my health and my friends and family for the profits of companies and politicians? So please listen to what all of us we have young people, old people, people of all races from all parts of Georgia here today, of all faiths and beliefs. Please listen to us and don't cap in place. We need a safer alternative, and that's available. Just invest in what will protect us all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
I have Briante McCorkle. Would you like to comment?
Hey everybody, yes, it is Briante McCorkle, and I am a resident of Fulton County, Atlanta, City of Atlanta. I'm also the director at Georgia Conservation Voters. And so I am commenting to say that this current proposal is unacceptable. It is wrong. And all the people who are commenting know that. I think Georgia Power's leadership also knows that, including the representative on this call. It's wrong. The proposal is to leave 1.1 million tons of what we know is a toxic substance That substance that we also know is poisoning the groundwater that people rely on in place. So we just want to leave it there. These ponds are leaking. That's a known fact. And the current plan just allows us that to keep happening, those leaks to keep happening. So as I see it, the current plan to leave this in place as is a plan to let communities be poisoned. I always have heard the phrase, failure to plan is a plan to fail. Well, this is a plan to allow communities to be poisoned in the long run. And for a company, Georgia Power in particular, that claims to care about people, the people it serves, and for the state leadership that claims to care about the health and well-being of the people of Georgia, especially its children, leaving these coal ash ponds in place as they are is wildly inconsistent with those stated values. This whole proposal is wildly inconsistent with what Georgians believe is important. The vast majority of Georgians have stated that clean air and clean water is important and that our leaders should be working to protect those things. That's evident from polling done by Pew Research, Harvard, Yale, and even the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. These polls are constantly coming out. And the bottom line is that nobody wants their water poisoned. The decision to leave the coal ash ponds in place as they are is not being driven by necessity, as the power company would have you believe. It is being driven by corporate greed. Georgia Power is not incapable of making a different decision and choosing a better option, many of which have been shared today, putting it in properly lined pits or excavating it, removing it entirely. But no, this decision is being driven by greed. Georgia Power can afford to do better, but leaving it in the toxic waste in place to poison communities is the cheaper option. And that is the option they were asking EPD to allow. It is unacceptable. It is wrong. I urge you all to reject this permit and to push the company for a more thought out and sustainable plan for dealing with the coal ash waste that they produced. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
I have reached the end of my list, but there's a possibility that I missed someone. So at this time, if there are a few remaining people that would like to comment, please state your name and affiliation. And
so Brian, there's a Miss Julia Barnes, and looks like Fletcher Sams would also like to comment. So two more.
I believe Julia commented earlier.
I would like to comment too, Gloria Hammond.
I want to comment.
Okay. One at a time, please state your name and affiliation.
Brian, let's go with Julia Barnes. She said she didn't get a comment earlier, and I know she was further up. So we'll start with Julia, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate getting to comment. Yes, my name is Julia Barnes, and I live in Rome, Georgia, in Floyd County, so I'm not far at all from the site. And I actually want to commend Georgia Power for wanting to put a solar farm on the site. I participate in their community solar program, although I worry that it's mostly symbolic. But before they do that, we must force them to do the right thing by the people of Rome and Floyd County and all of Georgia and Alabama, we're hearing as well. So that it involves asking the EPD to hold them to the absolute highest standard for human health. That seems to be having an actually dry, properly lined containment facility for this coal ash. So that is what I asked the EPD to do. I also take issue with the post-closure care of 30 years that Georgia Power is suggesting. This isn't a 30-year problem. This is a problem into perpetuity, and they need to be responsible for it into perpetuity. So I'll end my comments just by saying, let's please remember our neighbors in Juliet, Georgia, and not risk other people's health here in Rome and Floyd County and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Brian?
Anyone else?
Yes, I'd like to comment.
Victoria, if we could, Fletcher Sams had put his name in the chat. If we could get a Fletcher.
Okay, no, that's fine. I put mine in there too. I wasn't sure. Maybe it's not going through. Thanks.
We'll get you next if that's all right. Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Fletcher Sams. I'm the executive director of Baltimore Riverkeeper, an organization that advocates for safe water in communities throughout 56 counties in Georgia, which is about a quarter of the state, including Athens, Atlanta, Macon, Milledgeville, and Brunswick. We have 4 coal burning sites in the Altamaha watershed: Plant McManus in Brunswick, Plant Branch in Milledgeville, Plant Arkwright in Macon, and the largest coal burning plant in the Western Hemisphere, Plant Shear, located in Juliet, Georgia. On top of my day job, I'm also a 9th generation Georgian. I was raised in the same home that my ancestors built in 1821. My wife and I have chosen to raise our children here. We love this state and the people that call it home. I have many friends and family that live in close proximity to some of these ash ponds in the state, and I am deeply concerned for their safety and well-being. I'm here today to urge EPD to deny this permit. Georgia Power's own testing results have confirmed what we've long suspected, that each one of their plant's unlined coal ash pits is leaking coal ash into and contaminating the groundwater of Georgia. As many other speakers have before me have pointed out, coal ash and water don't mix, and any proposal to permanently store this waste in groundwater is an absurd abdication of EPD's duties to the citizens of the state. Perhaps more alarming than the composition of the contamination is the fact that there are thousands of Georgians living adjacent to these coal ash pits that draw the same groundwater up through their private wells for drinking, cooking, and bathing. Despite overwhelming evidence of groundwater contamination across all of these plants, Georgia Power is now in a race to abandon its industrial waste, using Georgia's groundwater as a permanent waste dumping ground, and is seeking to use the EPD permitting process as a shield to protect itself against any additional public scrutiny. This work has already been done at Plant Hammond AP3, with the power company asking for the permit after the fact, fully expecting EPD to issue any permit they request. You should not for any cap in place. The cap in place methodology for the closure of AP3 does not address the fact that the ash is and will remain in contact with the groundwater due to the lack of a liner and leachate collection system. With the submitted closure plans, Georgia Power will not protect groundwater quality post-closure. In fact, it will contaminate the groundwater in perpetuity. Beyond the technical issues with the specific closure plans, I'm also greatly concerned about the public losing its voice in regards to the closure, storage, monitoring, and possible remediation of these sites in the future. Juliet citizens in particular, located on the fence line of Plant Shear, will likely not have full ability to participate in a hearing opportunity for the proposed permits due to a lack of high internet speed. If Georgia Power is going to have the audacity to charge our citizens upwards of $8 billion to clean up the mess the power company made generating profits over decades, they ought to actually follow through and clean it up, not sweep it under the rug, or the final cover in this instance. I urge EPD not to approve any plan that leaves waste in contact with groundwater. Georgians deserve better. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comment. Next.
Vicki Freeman, we do appreciate your patience. If you'd like to.
Oh, no. I thank you for the time to comment, and thank you to everyone else for all their very insightful and intelligent comments earlier. My name is Vicki Freeman. I'm a member of the Sierra Club and an Atlanta resident. Thanks for listening to our comments about Georgia Power's request for a permit to bury toxic coal ash in unlined pits across the state, with the current pit in question being ash pond number 3 at Hammond. This is Georgia Power's first step to leave behind 50 tons of coal ash in unlined pits all over Georgia. At Plant Hammond, coal ash is just sitting submerged in groundwater, and it's dangerously close to the Coosa River and poses a threat to the river as well as nearby wells and bodies of water that we all depend on for our drinking water. Pollutants like arsenic and boron are contained in the ash, which pose a multitude of health risks, to include cancer. Please don't allow Georgia Power to abandon coal ash in unlined pits where contaminants can leach into the soil and groundwater. Other states have experienced the negative impact of coal ash contamination to their soil and water, which has resulted in large contamination issues in their states, with some of those sites being designated as Superfund sites, which are extremely expensive and pose many, many adverse health issues to the public. I strongly oppose the EPD's acceptance of the requested permit. The plan to abandon the coal ash is permanent and has a negative impact on future generations. Monitoring programs of unlined ponds don't stop contamination. It's actually in Georgia Power's best interest and benefit that they responsibly excavate the ash now, because it reduces large future financial exposure to them from contamination claims and cleanup costs. Our family's health depends on the EPD making the right decision now. Georgia Power is excavating ash from some of its unlined pits. Please make sure it's done on all of them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next commenter. I think we have time for perhaps one more comment. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Gloria Tatum, and I've lived in Georgia my entire life. I've watched Georgia Power for many years, and I know they will not do the right thing. I'm asking the EPD to force them to do the right thing. They cannot leave all of this poisonous coal ash in unlined pits or in so-called capped in place, which is like sweeping dirt underneath the rug and pretending like it's not there, because this is negligent criminal behavior. Because this poisonous coal ash will leak into the groundwater. It will migrate into the creeks and the rivers, where the toxins will make people sick, causing lung, heart, stomach medical problems. It will increase cancer in a community, and it will kill people. So I'm asking the EPD to please don't allow Georgia Power to leave this dangerous, poisonous coal ash in unlined pits that leaks into our water, or capped in place where it will also leak into our water and kill us. Please protect us from Georgia Power. Do the right thing. Don't do what is easy and cheap. Protect us from Georgia Power, please.
Thank you for your comment. It looks like we have just a few minutes left. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment?
Hi there. This is Gordon Draves. I'm president of Georgians Against Smoking Pollution, and would like to make some comments about the quality of Georgia Power and the tobacco companies. For generations, tobacco companies denied their products were killing people. We are still having 480,000 Americans die each year from tobacco smoke. That includes 53,000 from secondhand smoke. The thing is, Georgia Power has always had the pollution factor, polluting our air year after year after year. And now they want to leave the coal ash as a remnant of their making profit. And the thing is, they are just trying to defend their profits. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. But the difference between tobacco companies back in the 1950s, they denied how bad their products are. We know how bad they are today. Well, the thing is, we know how bad the products as coal ash and also smoke are from Georgia Power. So we should be requiring them to bury the ash in lined pits that will not be a problem for the future. Let's get together. Let's put everything on the line and tell Georgia Power to keep their ash in a safe place covered top and bottom. So the awful contaminants, the heavy metals, et cetera, will not escape into our waterways. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We are approaching the end of our second hour. I'll leave it up to William whether we accept one more comment or whether we plan to conclude our meeting. But I will say we do welcome written comments. Please send your comments to epd.comments@dnr.ga.gov. Please include as the subject Hammond AP3 draft CCR permit. Please send those via email or mail. Comments will be received until 4:30 p.m. on Friday, September 10th, 2021.
Hey, Tammy, this is William.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just so everybody remembers, I spoke at the beginning. I'm William Cook, and I'm program manager for Solid Waste Management Program. It looks that I can tell there are just maybe a few more people to comment. It is 8 o'clock. If everybody would like to be a little bit, would be patient, would like to stay, we'd like to hear your comments. Looking at it basically, and I apologize for any confusion. We basically were looking for people, if you put your name over in the chat, that helped us to give an order as far as the raised hands were concerned. First thing I would ask to help make sure we do get to everybody is if you've already commented, if you could simply hit on it and take off your raised hand, that'll help us. And I'm also looking at the chat, and I want to say, I apologize if I do miss anybody. Feel free to keep your hand up if I do miss you. And like I said, it'd be easier if you go ahead and put it back into the chat. But right now I see Janet, I hope I'm saying your last name, Rao, that you asked to make a comment. Can you go ahead? So Janet, are you still in the meeting? Okay, we'll go next to Gloria Hammond.
I'm here.
Yes, go ahead.
We're calling on EPD to protect our water from coal ash pollution, which everybody has already talked about here numerous times. But I want to tell you something for people that ever have their water tested to look for, not just the elements. That's all your health department's going to do if you use the health department. I'll give you a sample of what my water sample came back. And I live a quarter mile from Plant Share, which is in contaminate not just one but two aquifers here, and mine it has mercury, magnesium, hexavalent chromium. You have to specifically add hexavalent chromium. That's in your granite, rock, coal. He needs to step up, but they are pushing just to see a lot of our.
Okay, it appears that Gloria dropped off. Gloria, if you're still on, we at least lost your audio.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Yeah, but as long as this coal ash stays submerged there at Plant Hammond and other plants, it's going to be a constant threat to our drinking water. If the plans are to permanently close this and leave the ashes, who is going to protect our future generations? They did tell us on a meeting that I was on that Georgia Power said they will start monitoring the wells for 50 years. Well, on one call I was on. So I reckon, I don't know if that's changed back to 30 or not, but none of us, certainly not me, will be around 50 years to go see if they're monitoring. I don't expect them to do that very much, but we expect Georgia Power to treat Plant Hammond like the other plants. They are excavating and putting encapsulated liners. If it's a safe solution is right for some of these people from these plants, it should be for all of us. I think Georgia Power needs to get a better game plan. I oppose the EPD of this dangerous permit to camp Plant Hammond with the coal ash and leaving the groundwater. Also, if they do, I would like them to provide sound justification for their reasoning, for their acceptance of this dangerous proposal for Plant Hammond and the other planned camp in place. We have got to get something done about it because it is not right. And I just don't know what it's going to be. We all got to stay together and voice our opinions and keep talking.
Thank you for your comment. Next commenter.
Yes, I have as looks like Kelly Carter.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So first off, thank you for taking time today to listen to our concerns regarding leaving the coal ash at Plant Hammond and other plants around Georgia unlined pits. To introduce myself, my name is Kelly Carter. I've grown up in and am currently living in and working in the metro Atlanta area, circa Plant McDonough. And I wanted to speak today because I began doing a lot of research on Georgia's coal ash problem during the Public Service Commission elections last year. And quite frankly, I'm deeply upset that Georgia Power intends to leave coal ash from a number of their power plants in unlined pits. As has been mentioned on this call multiple times, coal ash is toxic. It contains dangerous heavy metals and carcinogens, and it's irresponsible to not ensure that the coal ash is excavated and stored in lined pits. As has also been mentioned, there's 1.1 million tons of coal ash sitting submerged in groundwater at Plant Hammond. This is a perpetual threat to our drinking water supplies. And keeping these pits unlined threatens the health of communities throughout Georgia. The toxins in coal ash have been linked to lung, heart problems, and premature death. Not only does an unlined pit threaten human health, it also threatens ecosystems throughout and along the Coosa River. So ultimately, I think it's very clear that this permit should not be issued for the health and safety of Georgians and to preserve the biodiversity that's needed to keep Georgia's ecosystems intact. We need the coal ash to be stored in completely lined pits. On the EPD's website, it stated that the EPD is a state agency charged with protecting Georgia's air, land, and water resources through the authority of state and federal environmental statutes. Issuing this permit directly clashes with the EPD's mission to protect Georgia's environment. So I ask, why are you playing into protecting Georgia Power's bottom line? Why are you putting their profits above the will of the people of Georgia? Other than the director of Georgia Power's Environmental Affairs, I haven't heard a single commenter speak in favor of capping in place. Please do what's best for the people and ecosystems of Georgia.
Thank you for your comment. Are there other commenters?
Yes, the next one, I believe Janet Rao, and I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. I believe you're back and you said you were still interested in commenting.
Yes, thank you so much. I jumped off to do something else and found out that I'd been called as soon as that happened. So I appreciate this. So Janet Rao, I'm with Sustainable Smyrna, close to the McDonough plant, have lived in the area for over 30 years. And as we look at the issues around coal ash, we have to understand that this is a point where we should be using the best technology to tackle this issue. And it is plain from all the research, from all the work that's been done to understand the issues of coal ash and how coal ash creates contaminants within our water systems, that cap in place is not the best technology. We have to do more. We have to require there to be lined pits. We have to require that the company continue to be in in control and liable for these pits beyond just a 30-year time period. The waste was created over more than 30 years, and their responsibility cannot just be stopped and have that then fall on the taxpayers of Georgia. This is incredibly toxic stuff, and we appreciate you considering denying this permit. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Are there other commenters?
I'm just looking, again, this is William Cook, and I'm not seeing that anyone else is making a note in the chat, and only see 2 hands raised, and those were both by folks who had already commented, Chris Bowers and Vivian Mcwilliams. So this time I would ask, feel free to either put your name into the chat, or that's probably easier if you raise your hands. We've got 4 different screens or 4 different pages to look at. So we'll give you just a few moments if anybody else would like to make a comment. Okay, again, not seeing any other hands raised. Thank you, Vivian, so you took your hand. I appreciate that. And also, not seeing anyone else in the chat at this point. I just see some comments being made, but don't see anybody noting that they'd like to make a comment. All right, well, with that said, I do want to thank everyone for your attendance at this public meeting. I'm sorry, I'll turn my camera back on. Anyway, I again like to thank everybody for your attendance at this public meeting. Hopefully we have now provided everyone who indicated they wish to make a comment today that opportunity to speak. We will consider all the comments that have been provided and any other relevant comments that were received throughout the public comment period. And again, want to note that that does officially end at 4:30 p.m. on September the 10th, 2021, and that is on a Friday. And again, I do ask that if you would like to make any further comments in writing, feel free to do so, and just again, have them to us essentially by close of business. That's again 4:30 p.m. on September the 10th, 2021. If you want for them to be included in EPD's final review of the proposed permit for Plant Hammond's Ash Pond 3 closure. I do want to again thank you for your interest in protecting Georgia's environment and your participation in this public meeting. The time is currently 8:12 p.m. and this meeting is now adjourned.